Horror is perhaps the most versatile movie genre there is. It ranges from supernatural hauntings to slashers to cosmic horror. But to me, the scariest subgenre of them all is the one that hits closest to home. Literally. I'm talking about body horror. The moment our flesh stops being ours and when the human body becomes the playground. I for one don't scare easily, but whenever something happens to the human body, I get uncomfortable. The definition of body horror goes as follows. Body horror, or biological horror, is a subgenre of horror fiction that intentionally showcases grotesque or psychologically disturbing violations of the human body or of another creature. It's important to note that while slasher films, for example, do portray violence to the human body, they aren't considered body horror per se. Body horror is more about uncontrolled transformation and the loss of control over your own body. Now, I'd like to preface this video by saying this. I am not an expert on body horror. Horror movies in general are not my main area of expertise. I'm more of a casual horror movie enjoyer. And in this video I'll explain why I particularly enjoy body horror, and I'll also give you some body horror recommendations. So let's get started by exploring why body horror terrifies us so much. In my opinion, the easiest way to put it is, it's human nature to be protective of our own bodies. It's basic survival instinct, so when that gets violated, it feels more personal than any ghost or killer ever could. Body horror makes us witness transformation, such as mutation, infection, and decay. These are things that should happen slowly or metaphorically, but are forced to happen all at once. You want to look away, but you can't, because deep down, body horror is essentially just life sped up and exaggerated. Birth, pain, death, and everything in between. And what makes these films even more dreadful is that they rarely have happy endings. Oftentimes the quote-unquote happy ending is simply the suffering character being put out of their misery. Of course, that's not always the case, but it's one of the genre's most common tropes. And with that being said, I would like to transition into the technical and thematic tools of the subgenre. Really dive into what makes body horror special. For me, the first thing that comes to mind is practical effects and prosthetics. These are crucial. It's important for the prosthetics to look touchable. They have to have a wet, sort of sticky quality to them. You have to be able to imagine what they would feel like. As soon as you start using CGI, that becomes way more difficult to accomplish. I'm not saying it's impossible, but doing things practically is usually the way to go. A lot of the time, the goal isn't to make a super realistic looking movie, but one that captures the essence of a nightmare. A movie can feel real without looking like something out of real life. Similarly to how nightmares can feel real in the moment, but looking back at them, there's nothing realistic about them. Sound design plays a big part in this as well. Just like the visuals, what's important is that the sound makes you feel something, as opposed to solely focusing on being hyper-realistic. I for one love it when body horror films utilize over-the-top, exaggerated sound effects. Whether it's bones crunching or skin peeling off or the sound of a heartbeat, I love being able to hear it all. Cinema is all about providing audio-visual experiences, and body horror understands that better than arguably any other film genre. Which brings me to cinematography. Body horror often utilizes tight framing and harsh lighting. The goal is to make the audience feel trapped within the flesh of the character. Close-up shots and handheld camera are common techniques within the genre. When you combine this style of cinematography with the practical effects, prosthetics, and exaggerated sound design, you get something truly horrifying. But that's just half of the equation. We need to talk about themes. Of course, every film has its own themes, but some of the most common ones in the body horror genre include identity, technology, decay, sexuality, and control. The body is used as a vessel to explore these themes. Admittedly, it's a bit difficult to talk about these themes so generally without getting into specific examples, but what I will say is that I think it's cool that a genre such as body horror, which is often dismissed as schlock, actually explores such interesting and rich themes. I suppose that goes to show that a lot of people really need to work on their media literacy skills. Now, before I start talking about specific body horror films, I'd like to address the evolution of body horror as a genre. Body horror has changed with the times. From Frankenstein's sewn-together corpse, to Cronenberg's diseased and mutating flesh, to the surgically perfected nightmares of the substance. Each era mutates the same fear, that the body is temporary and that it's rewriting itself faster than we can understand. The genre changes shapes just like its subjects. It's never really about monsters, but about us becoming something else. And with that being said, I'd like to talk about 10 or so body horror films that have stuck with me personally. Not all of these films are even that good in my opinion, but they're certainly worth talking about. So without further ado, let's get into it. Tetsuo the Iron Man and Tetsuo 2 Body Hammer, both directed by Shinya Tsukamoto. These are a pair of gritty, hyper-stylized films about metal and technology merging with human flesh. I'm aware that there's a third film in this trilogy called The Bullet Man, but I haven't seen that one yet. But as it stands, The Iron Man and Body Hammer are an excellent double feature. As for which film I prefer, I don't really know because they're very different films. The Iron Man is a lower budget film with more of a DIY quality to it. It's also a bit more extreme with its imagery. Whereas Body Hammer is a much higher budget film with more of a narrative to it. Body Hammer has more to say about masculinity and rage, whereas the Iron Man has more to say about industrialization. I suppose what I'm trying to say is that they balance each other out wonderfully, and whichever one you prefer comes down to personal taste. I think I slightly prefer Body Hammer, but they're both great, and I give them both a 7 out of 10. Possession, directed by Andrzej Zulawski. This is an interesting one, because I think the film is mostly psychological horror, but the body horror elements are undeniable. I won't get into spoilers because I think the film is best when you go in blind, but I will say that the subway scene is one of the freakiest things I've ever seen in a cinema. Yes, I saw this film in theaters. It was great. But getting back on track, I love how cold and distant this film feels. The color palette is sterile, the camera work is unconventional, and the film often uses large empty spaces to create a sense of isolation. And of course the performances are out of this world extraordinary. But yeah, admittedly this isn't your typical body horror film, but it's still a great one. And when it comes to psychological body horror, it doesn't get much better than this. I give Possession an 8 out of 10. Excision, directed by Richard Bates Jr., is a weird film. The premise goes as follows. An outcast teenager, Pauline, practices surgical skills and harbors increasingly violent psychosexual fantasies. This film may or may not be considered body horror in the strictest sense, but what I will say is that this is one of the bloodiest films I've ever seen, and it's also really funny. It's a horror comedy and a really twisted one at that. Again, I won't be getting into spoilers, but the longer this film goes, the crazier it gets. It's been like 3 years since I saw the film, and I still have images of it stuck in my mind. It's a coming-of-age film that explores themes of obsession, body image, and femininity. With how much this film focuses on the human body, I have a hard time not seeing it as body horror, especially with the whole surgical angle. It's a weird film, and I love it. I gave it a 9 out of 10 when I first saw it. I don't know if it will remain a 9 out of 10 when I rewatch it, but I'll stick with that for now. Old, directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Oh boy, people have some strong opinions on this film. It's about a bunch of people who get stuck on a beach that makes them age rapidly. I don't know what else to say. For what it is, I think the film is a ton of fun. Sure, it's filled with clunky dialogue and plot holes, but it's also a pretty well shot film that has a captivating premise. And I think Shyamalan does a pretty thorough job exploring said premise. Is this the scariest body horror film of all time? No, but it's not trying to be. Instead of trying to be really scary, I think the film is more focused on exploring different scenarios that could take place on a beach that makes you age rapidly. Like what if someone has a tumor, or someone gets pregnant, or someone breaks a bone. These are interesting ideas to me, and sure, the film could have done a better job presenting them, but I don't think it does a bad job either. As it stands, I think the film is okay, and I give it a generous 6 out of 10. Titane, directed by Julia Ducournau. I also love her other film Raw, but it's been so long since I've seen it, so I wouldn't feel comfortable talking about that film, but I love Titane too. What stands out to me the most about this film is the visceral sound design. There are moments where it makes me wince in pain. The premise is also quite simply insane. This woman gets impregnated by a car, but then she's on the run from the police, so she has to pretend to be this man's long-lost son to stay hidden. It's all very twisted and strangely beautiful too. The film explores themes of gender fluidity, femininity, grief, and so much more. It's a hard film to assess. Once the credits roll, you don't really know what you've witnessed, but you certainly felt it. And it is certainly a film that demands rewatches. I've seen it twice and I loved it both times. For now, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. The Substance, directed by Coralie Fargo. You've all seen it, and if you haven't, stop this video right now and go watch it. It's a one-of-a-kind film, and I'm so glad it became so successful. It's very uncommon for a horror film, especially a body horror film, to get so much recognition at the Academy Awards. That's not to say the Academy Awards mean anything, but it's still cool to see. The Substance explores themes of self-optimization, youth, and beauty standards, among other things. And it's simply such a fun film. Everything from the practical effects, to the music, to the sound design, to the cinematography, it's all spectacular. I have nothing to say about this film that hasn't been said 1,000 times before, but what I will say is that I'm super glad this film exists. It's a great sign for the future of body horror, and I'm giving The Substance a strong 9 out of 10. Tusk, directed by Kevin Smith. I warned you not all of these films would be good films, but here we are. Tusk is about a guy played by Justin Long who gets turned into a walrus against his will. I don't think this film is very good, but it does have a very dedicated fan base and I can see why. For all its faults, the film is full of personality. It's a dark comedy absurdist meta body horror movie, I guess that's the best way to describe it, and it's very memorable. That shot of Justin Long as a walrus has become iconic by now, and rightfully so to be honest. And look, even though I don't think this is a good film, I do think it's a pretty entertaining one. If you're looking for something to watch with friends, this might actually be kinda perfect. I suppose the point I'm trying to make is I kinda like this film, even though it's not very good at all in my opinion. It's like a 4 out of 10, but I still recommend it, especially with friends. I'm choosing to talk about David Cronenberg as a whole instead of going through his films individually, because let's face it, I could have filled every single one of these spots with his films alone. Simply put, he's the greatest of all time when it comes to body horror. He has been active for over 50 years, having directed over 20 feature films. I've seen 9 of them. So I still have a lot of watching to do, which makes me happy because I love David Cronenberg's films. In his films, flesh, sex, and disease become metaphors for modern life. And what's great is that he doesn't forget to have fun with his films. When you're watching films like The Fly, or Existence, or The Brood, or Videodrome, even though they're very dark films, you can tell that he's having a lot of fun making them.
I've come here to say one magic word to you.
Yeah?
Cheeseburger.
He's not just being grim for its own sake, it's more like he's curious, even amused, by human strangeness. It's that mix of clinical darkness and sly humor that makes his work so distinct. If you asked me for my favourite Cronenberg film, for now I would probably go with Crash, but in terms of pure body horror, it doesn't get any better than The Fly. There's a reason why The Fly is considered to be the face of body horror. I give David Cronenberg a 10 out of 10. Brandon Cronenberg is David Cronenberg's son, and I think he's doing a good job. He currently has 3 feature films under his belt, and I've seen 2 of them, Possessor and Infinity Pool, and I think they're both really good. I recently rewatched Infinity Pool, and you can tell that Brandon Cronenberg is working through his own personal struggles with nepotism and the fear of not living up to expectations, and he's doing it through art, which I love to see. The Cronenberg legacy seems to be in good hands. He still has some work to do when it comes to carving out his own distinct style, but he's well on his way. Possessor and Infinity Pool are both very conceptually interesting films, and they're very well made too. So with Brandon Cronenberg constantly improving and films like The Substance coming out, I think the future of body horror looks great. Possessor and Infinity Pool both get a 7 out of 10 from me. You knew I had to mention the Human Centipede trilogy. I already made a video on it, so go check that out. But yeah, these films are not good, but, you know, they're kind of iconic. I give them a combined rating of 3 out of 10. So there you have it, body horror, my favourite horror subgenre. At least I think it's my favourite. I just looked at a list of horror subgenres and this one stuck out to me. But whether it's my favourite or not, I don't think it really matters. I felt like talking about body horror, so I did. And in making this video, I grew to appreciate the genre even more than I did before. That's about it. Happy Halloween.